Well, these guys are interested in how it all got started and are in love with the Python. You guys have made a great reputation for yourselves, done movies, done it all.
In Dallas, yeah.
What the hell? Yeah, well, Dallas was your start. I mean, it really was a rough start, wasn't it?
Well,
For the shows in America.
I'm going to tell you, I mean, when we started Python, people couldn't make any sense of it, most people.
That's what made it so great.
I know. And it was terribly funny. And even now, when I show clips from Python, and with the light from the screen, I watch the first 2 or 3 rows, and some people are laughing hysterically. And then there's always 2 like that. I'm just trying to understand it, you know? After about 2 years, we heard that somebody was coming from America to see whether they might want to put it on American television. It was from WGBH. I always remember that one, because in England it means with grievous bodily harm.
The true story behind it is you had program managers, like the guy in Chicago, who was dying to put it on, and they killed him. So management could kill him.
Right.
And the Boston guy, I know he could have bought it.
Did they ever give a reason? I mean, was it too shocking, or would they get too
I
many?
thought it was too rude.
Yeah, but what did you think was going to happen?
I was scared shitless.
I mean, you think you were going to get stoned on the way, in the physical sense?
At that time in Dallas, we had things going on that were getting pretty dicey. Yeah, it was
Burning crosses.
I thought I didn't see any crosses. We did get threatening notes.
Did you?
Yeah, but not on that. Newsroom got a lot of threatening notes because they were covering things that had not been covered in Dallas before.
Really?
Tell the truth, all the truth, and nothing but the truth. But when you saw it on camera, we suddenly started seeing a lot of people showing up with news cameras.
Really?
And
that's why we did so well with Holy Grail, because when that opened in New York, we were lucky because you guys had just preceded us.
Yeah, just gone on.
You see, nobody knew us, and then suddenly, thanks to him, in Dallas, people began to hear it, and then it started going out in the stations all over America, and then we opened the Holy Grail, and we got this tremendous response.
You got a fabulous review in the New Yorker.
Really?
Holy Grail. Yeah.
I'd forgotten that.
Yeah, the guy said that everybody was saying that the exit lights were laughing. It was a great article. You've never seen it?
Oh, I may have seen it. Somewhere. When was this? 1930 what? You gotta forget.
1930. But we were born in the same decade.
Yeah. Yeah.
We had that in common. We have English in common, although Churchill would deny it.
No. But anyway, when we got the funny, the protests really got going when we made Life of Brian. And we were sitting in London, waiting to fly out to do publicity, and they rang us up and they said, "You don't need to come." The protesters had done the job for you. They'd started protesting before it had even opened. You see? And they were outside. I remember somebody had a big sign saying, "Monty Python is the agent of the devil." I remember thinking, I wouldn't mind being on 10% of what he did. And because of that, the evening news was started to cover them, and then it became a story on its own, so we didn't actually have to do any publicity. It's lovely when that happens.
John, can you talk about what it means to you on a personal level when Ron came to you and decided to air this, and what that meant to you as a performer?
Well, don't forget, this all happens at a great distance.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, people always think in this business that you know what's going on, and the answer is they don't tell you. I mean, it's quite an interesting experience when you finish a movie, because everyone's terribly nice to you. And then you cease to exist. You go back to the trailer and you take the makeup on, you get in the car, and then you'll never hear a word from them until they want you for publicity. But they never say we finished filming or we're very happy with it or these scenes work particularly well. They just forget completely about you. So we just knew that something extraordinary had happened, and we were so startled it was Dallas. You know, because in England in the old days we thought people in Dallas basically ate their own children.
Well, who says we don't? But as a performer, I mean, it had to be a big victory, I would imagine, because this
Well,
meant
but don't forget, this is after it had finished in England.
absolutely, yeah. But now that meant you were like global. You were on a global scale.
Yes, but we never really thought like that. We were
Okay.
just delighted. And then we thought, well, that's really nice because now we'll be able to make another film because this has been successful. So we then wrote a script that we thought was really good, which was Life of Brian.
Yeah.
And we couldn't find anybody who would give us $3 million. It's not a lot of money for a movie.
Not a lot at
And
all.
nobody would give it. We started in the UK, that was hopeless, and then we came here and there was not a single Hollywood studio that would give us $3 million. And you know the story about George Harrison, you know, Eric gave him the script and George laughed and said he put the money up. And Eric called me, I was just going off to do a film with Peter Sellers in Vienna. And Eric said, we got the money. And I said, well, what are you talking about? He said, George Harrison, I knew you knew him. And he said he was going to mortgage his house. And I said, why is he doing this? And Eric said, he said, I want to see the movie.
John, when you guys first started doing Python, did you think it was going to be as big of a success? Did you do it just for fun? Or how did it come about?
Because in those days, I mean this quite genuinely, we were quite pure in our motives. I mean, we worked for the BBC. We knew we would never make much money. I used to get £240 a show. £240. For a series, I got £4,000, including the writing. So we weren't doing it for the money, but we did it for the BBC, although we could get more money at ITV because they had a better track record on comedy. They had good directors and good floor managers. So we went to the BBC because they would make better programs, not because they give us more money. And we weren't terribly motivated by money. Because when I started, income tax, top rate in England, 83%.
I know.
Believe that. That was Howard Wilson in the Labour government. So nobody expected to make any money. We made a living, but we did it just because we loved to make each other laugh, really.
Yes, I had a question. I was wondering if you could share with us an actor or comedian who inspired you early on in your career.
Good. Well, you see, I didn't know I was ever going to go into this until my last year at Cambridge. The Footlights did this little review in the local professional theatre, and somebody turned up and said they wanted to put it on the West End. Now, by that time, I was 24. So I hadn't been thinking, you know, how am I going to... But you could tell we had a sitcom called Hancock's Half Hour with a fellow called Tony Hancock. And I remember once writing a line and thinking, that's familiar. And I realized it wasn't the line, it was the intonation, it was Tony Hancock's. In other words, it was still in my head 10 years later. But the stuff that I liked the best, we all liked, the teenagers liked, was the Goon Show.
Oh, yeah.
Which was wonderful. I mean, if you listen to that, so it's still the best use of radio for comedy that there's ever been, and we all loved that. And it was a little bit like Python. It was like a sort of little subversive society of people who liked it and who would do it almost word for word the next day in the playground. That was exactly how we were with the Goon Show, and I finished up actually doing a show with those guys once. I played the announcer, Wallace Greenslade, and I was up there with Peter Sellers, Harry Seacombe, and Spike Milligan. So there were things going on, but I mean, a lot of the comedy we watched in those days, there was the great early visual comedy, so Laurel and Hardy and Chaplin and Buster Keaton. Marx Brothers, and every couple of years in my late teens I would discover somebody else like the Marx Brothers and suddenly think, who are these wonderful people? And we had a lot of American humor because we had George Burns, Jack Benny, Phil Silvers, Amos and Andrew, sorry. And well, there was one other, but we didn't have Ernie. We hardly saw any of it. I went to see a thing called North of Alaska. It was the first time I ever saw him, and I thought, who is this marvelous man? We never had the Honeymooners, and we didn't have the Show of Shows. Which is very strange that we didn't have these great shows, but we did have some. And most of the comedy I watched in those days, you know, when I'd done my prep, was American, and Danny Kaye was the big comedy in the summer. And so we grew up very, very familiar with a lot of them. Then in my late teens, I started hearing about Mort Sahl and Nichols and May and Shelley Berman and Bob Newhart. And we started, that was records, you see. We weren't getting that stuff because a lot of them were in nightclubs. Right. So the American influence was very, very strong. And you know, it still remains very good. I think I almost automatically steal from anyone I think is good. I mean, what I like about comics, they do talk about stealing. You know, if I was an artist, I would say I was influenced by something. That's more polite.
Thank you.
Devin?
When you look at the generations of children and teenagers who latch on to Monty Python, and we're now on like 4 different generations who can at rote quote the cheese shop sketch, the dead parrot, all the rest of it. When you look at the legacy of Python, is there one thing that you did as the troupe that you wish had made it into that kind of pantheon? It's like, why did this sketch that we did?
Well, you never knew. I mean, there were lines that I always liked that people didn't pick up. There was a line in the Wizard Chocolate Factory. Remember when the hygiene inspector goes along and he says, what's this sweet meat here? Spring surprise. And the guy says, well, when you bite into it, steel bolts spring out from it. Lacerate your cheeks. And the hygiene officer says, where's the pleasure in that? I'll tell you how you sum it up. Someone early on said to me, what I love about Monty Python is that after I've watched it, I cannot watch the news. I cannot take it seriously. And that's, I think, is terribly important because we live in such a cesspit of a planet. You can't see the funny side of it.
Were you influenced by Beyond the Fringe?
By the
Beyond the Fringe?
Oh, enormously, yes.
Because it looks like you did Beyond the Fringe, but on steroids.
Well, I tell you what happened, and it's sociologically, it's very, very interesting. I saw Beyond the Fringe in Cambridge on its way into the West End. So I saw it about a month before it hit the West End. And I thought it was the funniest show I'd ever seen, and I still think that, because all of those performers were wonderful. Dudley, Peter, Alan Bennett, who's now one of our very best playwrights, and Jonathan Miller, who died, you know, last week. I'd never seen a show so funny. To the point when a sketch finished, I would have a pang of sadness that it was over. And then the lights would come up, and Jonathan and Peter would be there. Oh, you were But when it got to London, and I thought it was the funniest show I'd ever seen, but that's what I thought. This is wonderful comedy. When it got to London, all the critics saw was that it was satire. And there hadn't been satire up to that point. Michael Frayn, the playwright, told me he was sitting in Beyond the Fringe in the West End, and there were a couple of sort of upper class man and woman there, and Peter came out and started doing Harold Macmillan. Now we're entering into German here to meet here and there. And he goes on like this as a doddery old idiot, and suddenly the person in front of Michael turned to the girlfriend and said, my God, he's doing the Prime Minister. that tells you what it was like in those days. You didn't make fun of the Prime Minister, and they all collapsed because immediately after Beyond the Fringe had this enormous social impact. David Frost was on 5-6 months later doing That Was the Week That Was. And it changed the face of Britain completely. It went from being very deferential to quite cheeky and fun, and that was hugely important. But the odd thing was, the Beyond the Fringe people didn't particularly see it as satire. They just thought they were being funny. Do you see what I mean? But they did sketches like Death Penalty.
Yeah.
Oh,
I'm curious, throughout the years, I'm sure people have asked you for your advice, you know, as an actor, writer, or whatever, and but you've had such an interesting and different career path. I wonder what it is you say to people, because it's probably hilarious.
Well, I say to actors, I say, find a scene with your favorite actor or actress and watch it until you get bored. Because when you are bored, when you're no longer affected by it emotionally, then you can see how it's done technically. But while you're feeling sad or laughing, you can't see it. It's like the emotional response gets in the way of the analysis. So you just have to keep on. I used to play Peter Cook and Dudley Moore sketches from Not Only But Also. And I would play the sketch, and then I would sit down and try to write it from memory. And of course you think, well, no, and then you play it again, you think, oh yeah, that goes, oh, that would have to go before that. And by doing that until I could more or less write it out completely, it was a wonderful learning process. So I think take something that you love and look at it really carefully so that it's not affecting you emotionally anymore. Then you see the technique of it.
And as a writer? And as a writer?
Well, you see, trying to remember the thing, trying to remember someone's sketch or something like that, or trying to remember a particular speech and trying to see why it works so well. That's all you can do, and you try to watch the best people. Because then the sad thing about getting older as a comic is that you do know most of the jokes. You see what I mean? Yeah.
Well, I'm sorry.
Right here.
Yeah.
So out of all of the production, out of all the movies, out of all the episodes, what is your favorite scene?
I think it's a question of my mood. There are many favorite scenes. I don't want to say there's one that stands out, because if you ask me on one day, I might say something different. I mean, I was watching last night, or two nights ago, in Austin, I was watching some of the silliest things, and I was watching the fish slapping dog. And it still makes me laugh. I've seen it 300 times. And also laughing at the people who were going, but there isn't anything in particular. There's Faulty Towers, which we don't talk about so much. There's 2 or 3 episodes there. The dead body, the rat, and the one where the anniversary goes wrong. I think those are the 3 there. I think the second series better than the first.
I think Faulty Towers was absolutely brilliant.
So do I. It was good, wasn't it? It was little farces, little 30-minute farces.
Manuel, where did you find him?
Okay.
You know, guess where Andrew Sachs was born?
Germany.
Who said that? Very good. Berlin.
Really?
He was Jewish and managed to get out in the mid-30s, and he turned into the perfect English gentleman. You know, if you met him, you'd never think he was an actor. You would think that he was a rather quiet and very smart bank manager. Do you see what I mean? There's nothing about him that was show business at all.
Manuel is a bank manager.
Yeah.
That kills me right there.
But he was wonderful. You put the moustache on him, and he just changed it to someone else. He was quite extraordinary. His first language was German.
Was it either you or Andrew Sachs who suggested that Manuel be German at first, and then?
No. It was always Spanish, because just about the time I started that, the early 70s, The British restaurateurs decided that, or discovered that if they used people who didn't speak English, they didn't have to pay them so much. There was a stage about 1973 when if you went to an English restaurant, you got what you'd ordered, you were lucky. And that was just a manifestation of making fun of the fact that he used this. And what's so important about him, he's a totally sweet person. He's keen, he wants to help, he never gets cross, he gets sad about his rat, but he's always totally positive. And if he wasn't, he wouldn't be so funny, you know. It's the purity.
I mean, how does it feel to realize that, like, you brought something to America that changed art and comedy?
I'm pretty damn proud of it. Absolutely. I started a company, distribution company, worldwide. We had very few shows. I tried to get the Pythons to represent their shows worldwide when I went into business. That was 1980, 81, 82. And it didn't work out too well right at first. One day I got a call from London. They said, come over, we have to talk to you, it'll be of interest. We had about $5,000 in the bank as a company, so I said, I'm coming. I went, they had a meeting, they were all sitting around a table. I was in a chair right in the middle of the room. And I said, I want to represent the shows, and what do you think? And they had already decided. And they said, yeah, okay, we want you to do it, Ron, we want you to do it. And John's sitting at the end of the table. I have one suggestion before you can distribute our shows. The name of our company was Devellier Enterprises. You have to change the name of your company to Ron's TV Sales. You did that. You broke up everybody.
Well, we had some fun. I remember once we had to set up some company for an American accountants were setting up something which was favorable from a tax point of view, and they said to us, you know, can we have a number, you know, like accountants always do, can we have it now in 3 minutes? And we said we want it to be called Evado Tax.
John, thank you for coming.
Well,